still disappointed about the Goodwill Hunting bench, because I am. Hey everyone, so this is just a short running tour around Boston. I go to around the Freedom Trail and then I run around Boston Common and I just point out little touristy bits. The first thing is I'm now on Water Street, and when I turn off Water Street left onto Washington Street, you'll straight away see Spring Street. I will point it out. Spring Street is where the English first kind of set up in Boston. They were originally in Charlestown, but because of the water, and there's Spring Street on your left, I'll put a little picture up. Because of the water quality, it was so poor, a lot of them got sick, and they were made aware of that spring that was on that street, and this is why downtown Boston is here. And now, the building straight ahead with the clock is the Old South meeting place. Now, it was in that building where in 1773 the colonists met to debate the British taxation on their goods. And after that meeting, they then went to Boston Harbour and raided the tea ships and poured all the tea in the Boston Harbour, which became known as the Boston Tea Party. It was built in 1729 and it is part of the Boston Freedom Trail. The Old South Meeting House was almost destroyed in the Great Fire of Boston of 1872, but it was saved basically as a fire engine just turned up in the right time, and that's how it was saved. This street, Washington Street, was one of the main colonial roads in old-time Boston, and there's been buildings on this road since the 17th century. The Great Fire of Boston that I did mention destroyed a lot of the buildings, but like the Old South Meeting House survived, and other buildings did survive. The fire did get to about Washington Street. It kind of got detained at Washington Street. The fire started on Summer Street, and in a second I turn onto Winter Street. Summer Street is behind me. So Summer Street is now to your left. The fire, although it only lasted 12 hours, caused $73.5 million, which in today's money is just shy of $1.5 billion. Crikey. All the roads that led off of Washington Street used to lead to Boston Common, which is where I am heading now. It's straight ahead of you. But what we're heading to first, which is the building straight ahead of you, the little shelter, that is the oldest subway station in America, and the first subway station in America. It's been there since 1897. And again, that's the building directly in front of me. I don't think I've ever started a video and had to give so much information straight away. So, hello everyone, again. That was a lot to get through. This is Boston Common. I will say, I was just talking about the subway station. It's the subway station, not particularly that building that I was running towards. So just saying that as a guide to roughly where the station is. Boston Common is the oldest public park in America. It's been here since 1634. It was originally used for grazing cattle, and a lot of the streets I said before of Washington Street led to the Common. It's kind of assume was used as like a little cattle run to get your cattle to Boston Common. I'm running up to the Boston State House, which is now directly in front of you. The State House that you see is the oldest continually running state capitol building in the whole of America, and it's been there since 1798. And now the sculpture that is here is the Robert Gould Memorial, and this is to pay respect to the 54th Regiment of the Union Army. And this was the first all-volunteer African-American unit in the US Army, and it was formed in 1863 during the American Civil War. It was the first monument to pay homage to the heroism of African-American soldiers. I believe that the Robert Gould Shaw Memorial was vandalised as part of the George Floyd protests on the anniversary of its erection, the 123rd anniversary. To the right is Gould Steps, which was an old entrance for the Boston Common. The common was used for cattle up until 1830, and then later on in the 19th century it was used for pedestrians and the such like. It was also used as a camp by the British just before the American Revolutionary War. It was from here that the British Army left for the Battle of Lexington and Concord. I am now heading towards the Frog Pond, and the Frog Pond you might recognise as the outdoor ice rink in Boston. It's in the winter, it's the outdoor ice rink. In the summer, it is a splash pool. There's a squirrel. The squirrel in this place are particularly crazy. They just don't care. Boston Common is used for concerts, public events, gatherings. It's a very popular area in Boston. I'm sure if you're watching this, you probably know what Boston Common is, though. I was walking here. I know a friend in Boston, and I met up with the friend, and we were walking through the park the night before. I was only in Boston for 24 hours. That's the old Carousel. I'm sure I don't need to point out everything. I'm sure you know what that is. Anyway, and it was like I don't know what the correct title of it was, but I think it was for like the freedom of cannabis or make cannabis legal. It was like an arranged event, and we walked through here, and I have not been that high since I was a teenager. It was crazy, but it's used for lots of different events and gatherings. And this is the morning after. This is 7 a.m, as all my runs are very early in the morning. So curiosity got the better of me, and I just had to Google what it was. It was the Boston Freedom Rally that I accidentally took part in. It was the second largest annual gathering demanding marijuana law reform in the United States. So yeah, man, let's listen to the Floyd and make it legal, bro. I feel I have adequately shown my support for the continuation of love for Pink Floyd. So there's a lot of information to give out, because obviously Boston is a very historical and important city for America. So let me just indulge myself and give out some excuses. It wasn't anything to do with the marijuana, but when I was in Boston, I felt incredibly poorly. I was not very well, and I flew home on this day. And the reason I'm saying this is an excuse is, unfortunately, I don't get to do everything on this run that I wanted to do. I had to call time on it. I'll get back to that in a second, because I just remembered we're getting to another cool point. This sculpture is the Make Way for Ducks sculpture, and there it is, just on your left. I thought that was a cool little sculpture. I didn't know any of the history to it when I walked past it the night before this run. It is based off the Make Way for Ducklings book by Robert McCloskey. It is the official children's book of Massachusetts, and it's the most famous statue in the entire city. So I read in my research. Now, don't come after me if that is incorrect. I do apologise. The sculpture was put there in 1987, and there is also a carbon copy of that sculpture in. I'll let you guess which city would have a copy of that sculpture. Moscow is the answer. There's probably a reason, and if you know the reason, tell me. I don't know that reason. This is the Ether Monument. Well, that was on my right and now behind me. As I was saying, I had to cut this run short. I was meant to go a bit further. All this goes to plan. I don't stop running or anything. I get to the Massacre site and the old State House, and I just needed to get back. I'm sure you can figure out why. Straight ahead of us is the George Washington statue. It's incredibly famous and iconic image of Boston, that statue. Whenever you see like a touristy book of Boston, you'll see that statue. It was dedicated in 1869. George Washington was the first American president, serving from 1789 to 1797. I am not using Google for any of this information whatsoever. He originally served in the British Army and then fought for the Continental Armed Forces in the American Revolutionary War. The Goodwill Hunting Bench was just before the bridge to the left. I didn't go. I'm very saddened to learn that. Again, there's quite a few bits I didn't do on this run, unfortunately. This is where you go to get the Swan Boats, if that's of any interest to you, or you're still disappointed about the Goodwill Hunting Bench, because I am. I can only apologise for that mistake. Anyway, the Swan Boats. A very iconic thing to do in Boston. They have been there since 1877. That original lagoon was used for the ice skating, and that lagoon is where the ducks go in the Make Way for Ducklings book. That's more interesting than Robin Williams, isn't it? And now the statue on the left is Edward Everett Hale, a native Bostonian, and his famous quote is, "I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something, and I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do." However, my favourite quote from him was when he was asked, "Do you pray for the senators, Dr. Hale?" And he replied, "No, I look at the senators and I pray for the country." And I think that's something we can all relate to in the year 2020. I think it was one of the first videos that I ever did on this channel when I ran New Orleans. I think it was the second video, and I ran down Bourbon Street, and it was the morning after the night before, and it was just crazy to see Bourbon Street as it looked compared to how it looked like 12 hours before. And I got this same vibe here in Boston Common. I was here even less than 12 hours before, and it was just absolutely heaving with people. Back in the good old days when we could all get together, eh? And to see it like this, I always preferred things like this, all quiet, and I don't know, it's just the way I am, but I would love to see it heaving with people. As I do this voiceover on the 10th of September 2020. Anyway, this is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument in Boston Common. It's in memory of the Massachusetts sailors and soldiers, that is a mouthful for me, who died in the American Revolutionary War. It was dedicated in 1877. Anyways, back to me making my excuses. As I was trying to make my excuse before, I'll get back to it now. I didn't go to the Paul Revere house, or his statue, or the Old North Church, or Copp's Hill burial ground. I believe all are part of the Freedom Trail. Boston's not a particularly awkward place to get to from England. You can normally get a cheap flight, so all things being well with the world and pandemics being over, I should get to Boston at some point in the near future, I would say. And I'll do a proper run if I do it. Although I haven't said that, I can't run at the moment. But yeah, I forgive me for that. Yeah, we all feel a little icky from time to time. I'm just heading out of Boston Common. I'm heading out the way I came in. So I've got a bit of a break from the commentary now. I'll pick back up with you when I get to the fountain. I'm going to take this time. I don't normally do this. I'm going to ask. I normally do it visually, but I will speak to you. If you are watching and you're enjoying the video, can you just press the subscribe button? I don't have many subscribers, which is okay. I try not to bang on at you to subscribe, but if you could, it would mean a lot. Thank you. The church that's straight ahead of you is part of the Freedom Trail. The Freedom Trail actually starts in Boston Common if you're doing it the way it's meant to be done. I don't know if that's the correct way to say it. It's the way it appears in the brochure. That is Park Street Church, built in 1809. It was the site of the first Sunday school in the United States, and this happened in 1818. Again, we're at Park Street subway station, which we have been through. Abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison made his first anti-slavery speech at this church in 1829, and it is fitting that it is now opposite a Burger King. Oh, the modern world. Next to the church, I'm not running particularly quick today, so bear with me as I catch up to the commentary. Where the trees are and behind the grey wall is the Granary burial ground. The granary stored wheat, and it was originally on the site of where the Park Street Church is. There is said to be over 5,000 bodies buried here, and they include some of the victims of the Boston Massacre, Also, 3 people that signed the Declaration of Independence are buried here. Robert Trent Payne, Samuel Adams, and John Hancock. And they're all to the left. John Hancock is the way he signed the Declaration of Independence is why when an American says, "Put your John Hancock on that," thank you, it means sign here, because his signature on the Declaration of Independence was very big, bold, brash. I believe that's true. If you are interested in the Freedom Trail, there's like a little line that runs underneath you. So an example is here. This little brick line, this is a sign of this is the Freedom Trail. It's a bit like in Berlin, where the old Berlin Wall used to run. They got a little mark on the floor. If you haven't seen my Berlin Wall run, I'll put a little link. What a good segue that is, eh? Anyway, that on our right, well, it's now the burying ground on the right, but just before was King's Chapel. The original church was built there in 1688, and it's the site of the first Anglican church in America. The stone structure that is there was built in 1754. The burying ground, funnily enough, is not affiliated with the church and is not affiliated with any church. It predates the chapel by more than a century. The chapel was laid vacant during the American Revolution. The burying ground is the oldest graveyard in the city. We are now coming into City Hall Plaza. I've kind of left the Freedom Trail. I can't think why I left it, but I did. That is City Hall straight ahead here. That is a particularly ugly looking building. Boston feels quite English. I really don't mean to cause offence with that. It just has a bit of a England city vibe to it. But even that City Hall, that is something you would see in an English city. It's from the 60s, you can tell just by the architecture it's from the 60s. They are in lots of English cities. You can blame us for that building. It's called, the style is called Brutalist, apt. And you see it, you go into like a really nice old English city and there's so many beautiful old buildings and architecture and it's just fantastic. And then you'll see a building like that and it's just so out of place and ugly. But it all came about from post-war, post-Second World War, when they just had to erect buildings really quickly and cheaply. So you can kind of understand it in that sense. It was mainly used for like city halls and universities, libraries. They all kind of had the brutalist style, but it's just hideous looking in it. And again, yeah, you can thank us for that. Anyways, after you finish thanking England for that, we are now at Faneuil Hall. I do not think I'm saying that right. And Quincy Market's here as well. This is a very famous market in Boston. It was opened in 1743. It was the site of many speeches by Samuel Adams. I've mentioned him a few times now. He's one of the founding fathers of America. He's a treasure of America, and in particular Boston had so much to do with America becoming an independent country. Like I said, that's his statue just out the front there. There's that big canopy or tarpaulin in front of it with the American flag on. I would like to have seen it without that. It's obviously very iconic. from there, Samuel Adams did a load of his speeches to encourage independence from Great Britain. It is said to be one of the most visited places in all of America. And statues all over Boston. I really enjoyed Boston. I think memorials and stuff that America did. Well, I suppose all memorials are pretty beautiful no matter the country, but there's lots of sculptures, statues, and memorials in American cities, and in particular the older ones. Boston, Washington, Philadelphia. And this is the Holocaust Memorial. This was erected in 1995 by Stephen Ross, who is a survivor from the Holocaust. On the walls, you'll see, you can just make it out there, all the different numbers. They all represent people that died as a result of the Holocaust. Each tower, there are 6, are said to represent 1 million Jewish people that died. So 6 towers, 6 million people died. And also to represent an extermination camp. Steam rises from the floor. It's a lot more impressive at night time than in the daytime. Yeah, I really like that. I did that the night before. It's a lot more impressive at night, as I just said, but I thought that was interesting and well done as well. I'm about to just skip here. As you saw as I came down, there was the couple of homeless fellas that were sleeping on the benches, and then the streets were being cleaned, and I just thought it was so, I don't know, just the streets are clean but the people aren't. Welcome to America. Again, that's Faneuil Hall on the left. That's where I had my chowder. I'm going for the Simpsons accent there, not the Bostonian. Right, I've not got long left, and a little bit of history. Well, a lot of history to get through. We are coming up to the Boston Massacre site, and I quote John Adams from this: "The foundation of American independence was laid here on March the 5th, 1770. This event was brought about due to growing unrest from the colonists towards British Parliament for the taxes. And on this day, a crowd confronted 8 British soldiers. As the insults grew and the threats grew, the soldiers fired at the colonists and killed 8 people. The plaque for that event is on the floor to my right, and that balcony... Oh, Lee didn't look up. The balcony, you could see it all the way as I was running up, the white balcony. It was from there on July 18th, 1776, that the Declaration of Independence was first read to Bostonians. That is Boston Old State House. It's the oldest surviving public building in the whole of America. This run has ended. I will have to continue. It was constructed in 1713. It was at the top of what was known as King Street. As I said, July the 18th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was first read to the Bostonians. They were so excited that they jumped on top of the old State House and ripped 2 signs of British authority from the top of the building. Thank you so much for watching. This is Overrun. I'm sure I've put pictures here, hopefully if not on my face, for you to enjoy as I rub it on. Thank you for watching. Peace. Stay safe.